So we've talked about psychological theories, but how does sociology approach this? It's important to understand the difference. Psychologists generally focus on the mind's influence on behavior. They look inward at things like mental health and emotional processes. Sociologists, on the other hand, focus on how society shapes our behavior. They look outward at things like social institutions, cultural norms, and our interactions with others to understand who we become. All right, let's do a quick activity to check our understanding of these psychological theories. On the screen, you'll see 4 psychologists we've just discussed and 4 descriptions of their main theories. Take a minute to try and match each person to their core idea. Okay, let's go over the answers. Sigmund Freud is matched with a theory that self-development is tied to early childhood psychosexual stages. Erik Erikson believed personality develops through 8 social stages across the entire lifespan. Jean Piaget's theory is that the self develops by balancing internal knowledge with social experiences. And finally, Harry Harlow's work showed that social comfort and maternal care are crucial for healthy development. Now that we have a handle on the psychological perspective, let's switch gears and look at the sociological theories of self-development. Remember, these theories focus more on how our interactions in social environment shape our identity. One of the foundational sociological ideas comes from Charles Cooley. He introduced the concept of the looking-glass self. The idea is that our sense of self isn't just who we think we are, but it's also a reflection of how we think others see us. It's like we're looking in a social mirror. Cooley described this as a 3-step process. First, we imagine how we appear to others. Second, we imagine their judgment of that appearance. And third, we experience a feeling like pride or shame as a result of that perceived judgment. Another major figure in sociology is George Herbert Mead. He defined the self as a person's unique identity that is developed through social interaction. According to Mead, we aren't born with a self. To have a self, we must be able to see ourselves from someone else's perspective. This is a skill we learned over time through the process of socialization. Mead broke down this learning process into several stages. The first is the preparatory stage. In this stage, young children simply imitate the actions of people around them, like their parents, without really understanding the meaning behind those actions. For example, a toddler might babble into a toy phone because they've seen an adult do it. Next is the play stage. Here, children begin to take on the role of one other person at a time. This is when you see kids playing house and pretending to be the mom, or playing school and acting as the teacher. They're starting to see the world from a single different perspective. After the play stage comes the game stage. At this point, children learn to consider several roles at the same time and how they interact. Think about a child playing a team sport like soccer. They have to understand their own role, but also the roles of their teammates and even the players on the other team. Finally, we develop an understanding of the generalized other. This is the common behavioral expectations of society as a whole. When we reach this stage, we can understand how we are seen, not just by one person, but by many others in society. According to Mead, this is when we truly have a self. Let's do another quick activity to review these sociological concepts. I'm going to show you a short paragraph with some words missing. Your task is to fill in the gaps with the correct terms from Cooley's and Mead's theories. The text reads, Charles Cooley's theory of the ... suggests that our self-concept comes from how we believe others see us. George Herbert Mead said that we develop a self through social interaction. He described a process starting with the ... imitation, moving to the ... taking on one role, And then the ... understanding multiple roles. Finally, we understand the ... which is the general expectations of society. Take a moment to think about the right words. Okay, let's see the answers. Charles Cooley's theory is the looking-glass self. Mead's process starts with the preparatory stage, moves to the play stage, and then the game stage. Finally, we understand the generalized other. Great job! Now we're going to shift our focus slightly to another critical aspect of self-development, how we learn right from wrong. This is known as moral development, but the key part of socialization, because it helps us learn to consider what is good for others and for society as a whole. Psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg developed a very influential theory on this topic. He proposed that our moral development happens in three main levels: pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. In the pre-conventional stage, typical for young children, morality is all about direct consequences. Good is what avoids punishment, and bad is what gets you in trouble. Next is the conventional stage, which usually develops in the teenage years. At this point, we become more aware of others' feelings and what society expects. Morality is based on conforming to social rules and norms to maintain order. Finally, in the post-conventional stage, people begin to think about morality in more abstract terms, like justice, liberty, and human rights. Let's look a little closer at post-conventional morality. A key feature of this stage is the recognition that what is legal is not always what is moral. People at this level of moral reasoning operate on universal ethical principles. A powerful real-world example of this is the 2011 Egyptian protests. Hundreds of thousands of people challenged a government that was legally in power, but which they viewed as morally corrupt. They were acting on a higher principle of justice. But Kohlberg's theory wasn't without its critics. Sociologist Carol Gilligan pointed out a potential problem. Kohlberg's research was based only on male subjects. She wondered if this created a gender bias. Her own research suggested that boys and girls might have different approaches to morality. She found that boys tend to have a justice perspective, focusing on rules and laws. Girls, on the other hand, seem to have a care and responsibility perspective, where they considered the reasons behind people's actions and the relationships involved. Gilligan didn't argue that one perspective was better than the other. She theorized that they served different purposes. She suggested that these differences were a result of gender socialization. Boys, she explained, are often socialized for work environments where rules are important for smooth operations. Girls, in contrast, are often socialized for home environments where flexibility and nurturing are key. The important takeaway here is that our moral views are not just innate. They are heavily shaped by how we are socialized. Let's look at a real-world example of this gender socialization in action. Think about how often we praise little girls for their appearance. We say things like, "What a pretty dress," or "You look so cute." Author Bloom argues that this constant focus teaches girls that their appearance is extremely important. And the statistics are concerning. About 50% of girls between the ages of 3 and 6 worry about being fat. This is a powerful example of how society reinforces different expectations for boys and girls from a very young age. Some have tried to create environments that challenge this type of gender socialization. A well-known example is the Igalia preschool in Sweden. There, they create a gender-neutral environment. Children are called by neutral terms like friend instead of he or she. Toys and play areas are set up to avoid reinforcing traditional gender roles. The goal is to remove societal gender norms and let children develop without those pressures. Now it's your turn to think. Can you come up with some other real-life examples of how boys and girls are socialized differently? Think about things like toys, clothes, the activities they're encouraged to do, or the expectations people have for them. You might have thought of some great examples. For instance, boys are often given action figures and encouraged to play sports, while girls are given dolls and encouraged to be nurturing. We might hear people tell the boys don't cry, while girls are generally allowed to be more emotional. These are all ways that society shapes our behavior and identity based on gender. So, let's quickly summarize what we've covered today. From a psychological view, thinkers like Freud focused on early childhood, Erikson on lifelong social development, and Harlow on the need for social comfort. From a sociological view, Cooley gave us the looking-glass self, and Mead explained how the self develops through social stages. And in moral development, Kohlberg outlined 3 levels of moral reasoning, while Gilligan critiqued his work and highlighted the powerful role of gender socialization. That brings us to the end of our lesson.